Jamie Taylor and Jonas Dodoo, welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast.
Thank you. Really good to really good to be here.
It's good it's good to have you, Jamie. Jonas, you're a seasoned pro now. This is the sixth time maybe. Who knows? It's a delight to have you. It's a delight to have you back on again, but also slightly gutted that you're on holiday, but can't win them all. Jamie, would you mind just giving us a brief introduction to you, and then I'll come to Jonas for a brief introduction, and we'll dive straight in.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for having me on. So I'm a senior coach developer at Grey Matters. My work runs across lots of different sports, lots of different coaches, lots of different contexts. But effectively, my main role is helping coaches get better at what they do, and that's the essence of why we're here today, really.
Perfect. Jonas?
I'm a coach. I've been a coach for as long as I can remember now, most of my adult life, if I wasn't playing rugby. But I guess COVID has forced me to become more of a businessman and to wrap my knowledge and information and try to help other coaches. And I think I've always been helping coaches along the way, but never in a real formal way, never a super focused way. And then I leave my coaches to do most of the coaching for me. So again, that's been difficult, watching them have all the fun, pretend to work all day on the track while I'm in the office or in the garage in Zoom. So a new normal after COVID, and actually I'm really enjoying it.
I know obviously COVID hasn't been a positive thing, but from Speedworks' point of view, has that been a positive thing for you in the business?
Yeah, it really has. I mean, most people have negative stories about COVID, but for me, I got sick really early on, just about a week before everyone went into lockdown in March. And I was stuck in my garden on the trampoline with my kids in the sun for 4 or 5 months. And it was great. I had no responsibilities. My athletes had moved on to other coaches because I was sick for quite a while and it made sense for them to do that. And I absolutely enjoyed the initial lockdown period. And then my wife said we're broke and I should do some work. And I had to convert our garage into an office and actually start working. And that part was sticky and challenging, and we tried lots of little things. And I had young staff who were really interns that I decided to take on, and that was a rocky period, just learning who had what skills and what skills I had to develop as a leader and all that stuff. But coming to 2021, we put on a few workshops and webinars and courses online, and they really blew up. They really blew up, and it really helped me expand into the States and into Australia, and more teams in the UK aware of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And it was fun. It became really fun and became an actual business model. So I've got probably more positive stories off the back of COVID than negative. So, the only problem is I didn't get to go to the last Olympics, and I was building towards that for the past 4 years. So that probably had a massive emotional strain on me, but actually probably the right timing as well in my coaching journey to do this. So good thing.
And from the outside, it looks like you're absolutely smashing it. So congratulations. Which brings us nicely onto the collaboration with Jamie and the guys at Grey Matters. Would you be able to give us a little bit of an insight into that? Because you announced it last week or the week before, I can't remember. But give us a bit more insight.
Well, I think if I talk about the courses that we've run and a lot of the online Zooms off the back of it, and we've had thousands of coaches, and at the time I didn't really always know their backgrounds, but across all the leagues, all the major sports across the world, some very impressive coaches in impressive roles signing up and asking me what felt like very fundamental questions, very simple questions, but really challenging to apply or to answer those questions in their environments. And I had nothing but imposter syndrome, but I tried to help as many people as I could, right? And we had lots and lots of positive feedback, and I get this way sometimes. I sit at home, and if I don't hear the feedback, I'm sitting wondering, are we doing a good job? Am I doing a good job helping the coaches? Is our material clear enough, etc. But we had really good positive feedback. But off the back of it, in preparation for this year, I said to myself, I don't want to go through that cycle of being like unsure if I'm doing a good thing or not. And then I talked to some of the coaches that were like real consistent feedback guys, and really a lot of them wanted to understand how I went through my journey. I'm relatively young, but I've coached some really good athletes at a really good level, and I've been able to help other coaches. And people often ask, so what did I do, and who did I learn from, and what was my process? And I thought back, and going all the way back to my masters, studying Dave Collins' work in my masters, in my lectures, and learning about heuristics, learning about expertise, and trying to find the best coach I could in Dan Path, and using his heuristics and his blueprint to really set the tone for how I coached, and then being lucky enough to be mentored by him over time, and Stu McMillan and Mike Afalaka and a whole heap of other coaches. But it got to a point where I'm like, well, why don't I just go and find the people that have helped me? And people wouldn't really know that even though I read Dave's work, I guess 16 years ago, I also call him and sit down with him and find a way to, like, there's been times when I've been broke, but I've just found a way to be like, Dave, let's meet up and look, consult with me and help me on my journey. And so rather than just tell those stories, I thought, let's bring in Grey Matters. And I've been talking with Jamie, we're both at Loughborough. I've been talking with him. I've been sometimes watching him coaching sneakily. He doesn't know this. And so we just got talking more and more about how could I integrate the important lessons that I had learned, and rather than just me try to regurgitate it, how do I actually just bring those guys in and add value to our courses, and not just talk about the research papers, but actually integrate it into our coaching models. So that's how we are where we are right now.
So just to go one level deeper, Jamie, to bring you in here, what is it that you can offer Jonas and Speedworks and the coach development side? Because like I say, from the outside, looks like Jonas and Speedworks are absolutely killing it. So what is needed? What can you bring that adds to the great work that these guys are already doing?
Oh, well, look, first of all, Jonas is absolutely killing it. I think he's got a fantastic reputation across the industry. And okay. Look, our relationship is very much about something that's additive. And Jonas mentioned a couple of really interesting things in there, which I think that often as coaches, and I myself found this as a coach earlier on in my career, I found myself as somebody who was being told, look, this is the way to do this. There is one way to do this. This is the model. This is the way you should follow this. And now looking back on that, I'm thinking, well, that sounds a lot like a cook to me. Somebody who follows a recipe, they put this in with a little bit of dash of this, great, job done. And what we're going to do is rinse and repeat and do that as many times as we possibly can. Now, look, this is a well-worn idea that you can have cooks and you can have chefs. Michelin-starred chef doesn't work from a recipe. They tweak, they add little bits of this, bits of that, and that's all based on a knowledge base. Now, what Jonas clearly has is a massive base of experience working across lots of athletes, lots of contexts, and he's got a great track record of working. And that's one of the major appeals for me working with him. But he points out something really interesting, and that is, in most cases, most coaches have got a really, really sharp knowledge of what they're coaching. I want to make these tweaks to this element of physical performance so that my athletes get better at what they do. But I think probably across strength and conditioning, across physical performance, one of the things that isn't done particularly well is how do you get there? How do you coach like that? And if you're going to be a chef, you need to know why you're going to coach like that, which means integrating different bases of knowledge from different areas, using your experience. And ultimately, what we call that is research-informed practice or evidence-informed practice. Because no two athletes are the same, no two environments are the same. And ultimately, as a coach, you've got to grow that level of adaptability. So if we're looking at the project that we've got, and I'm really excited about this as well, is effectively we're combining some of the best physical performance knowledge in the world that's being applied in loads of different domains. And what we're doing is just sharpening. What we're adding is, what do we know about some of the best ways of how to do this and why a coach might do this in a particular circumstance.
So in terms of your involvement on a day-to-day basis, is it looking at Jonas's frameworks of how he delivers, or is it actually you being one-on-one or small groups with Jonas's coaches so they can then better deliver to the athletes? How is that working logistically from the partnership point of view?
Well, we've been sitting down chatting, coaching to each other for a fair while. And one of the things I suppose that I first noticed when we were chatting is that the mental models and the frameworks that we both work from are not a million miles apart. And indeed, in most cases, are very, very similar. Now, what I think that we add here is just touching things up a little bit, being able to go, okay, well, if I'm a coach in this particular circumstance here, how might I best go about doing this? Helping coaches think through, right, why might I sprinkle a bit of this and not a bit of that? So in terms of what we add, Jonas and I are chatting day-to-day basis about how he's currently coaching, and same for me as well. I mean, this is definitely not a one-way partnership because Jonas is checking, challenging me on my coaching as well. But it's more about what we can offer a group of coaches who we think have missed out this element of how do we coach and why do we coach that way? Because everyone is given the what, but the problem is you can only cope with so much what before you start having to go, well, why might I use it there and not there?
Jonas, you mentioned that you were getting questions of how coaches can implement certain things that you were teaching, and you were, I can't remember what term you used, but you were winging it. You felt like you were winging it a little bit. What kind of questions were you getting asked?
Okay. The questions are varied. So, like, this what, how, and why thing is where I always come back to, and it's kind of how we framed our next line of courses. So the what part is generally for doesn't have to be a novice coach, but maybe a physical performance coach or a physio return to play type of person who hasn't been really exposed to sprint science, doesn't really understand, or is stuck in a very typical S&C model of how they do things, is very much needing a clear training menu, a clear way of categorizing exercises, an underpinning of the science and rationale behind it. So there's that what part, and I think that part's always easy, and that's the stuff that goes viral on social media. We make cool videos, cool graphics that help summarize paper upon paper, help summarize some of the heuristics and key bits that people should know, just information. Some of the knowledge part is probably the next part. So that's where we've always provided case studies, and where I've got a really nice group of coaches across the world and physios across the world that have always been happy to share. So I go and the people I learn from are the people that I use in my material, right? They're the people, because if they've influenced me that much, then I'll go to them. And they always talk about probably more like the how. So here's that information. And in this scenario, I took that information, I took that, these exercises and that rationale, and I applied it in this way. And so that's again, relatively easy. But the why part is like the deep stuff that's inside my like in my subconscious almost, right? That's the stuff that makes me sit down and go, my wife laughs at me because she knows when I'm in deep thought because my eyes go up here. And I actually don't talk. And the thing is, I have no problem with eye contact, but I need to find it somewhere deep. So I'm up here and I'm thinking, I'm visualizing, I'm trying to make sense of the why behind it. And I'll go off on a rant about and kind of just give the context and try to really paint that picture. And that's the part what I'm not disappointed by, because we've got lots of coaches that love that part because it's the real story. It's the stuff that helps them to understand it. But there are many other coaches who will get lost in that. And they really needed a 2-line answer, not a 20-minute answer. They can't sift, they can't read between the lines of that story and pull out the important messages. And that's the stuff that made me feel like I can do better than that. I feel like the coaches that are buying into us deserve more than that. And so talking more to Jamie about it and talking more to Dave and just reflecting on it, I also realized that 2-line answer won't give them the why. It won't because actually the why or understanding how they input that into their own philosophy does require them to be able to think critically, does require them to be able to look up at that information and knowledge that comes in those first two stages so they can create wisdom. And again, I'm 36, so and you know, my kids are turning 4 and 7, and I'm only learning how to be a real man now. That's my honest opinion, right? So then it made me think, let me find some people that are a tiny bit grayer and a tiny bit more worn and torn than I am. I'm talking about Dave here. And let me lean on their expertise, because they've developed thousands of coaches across multiple domains. And so actually, how can I, and you know, the more we talk about it, the more I learn from them, I do realize I do know those answers, and I do have that framework, but I don't want to feel like I'm babbling through it. I want to make sure that coaches are getting exactly what they need. And again, it's not a two-liner, it's a process. It's that ability to talk on it, to discuss it, to be challenged by it, by us as maybe the coach education team, by their peers, and to do it in a safe environment, do it in a way that actually they feel it's okay to let down their guard. It's okay to show weakness or lack of understanding, because by identifying that lack of understanding, it allows them to drive towards it and actually address it. So that's the process.
Jamie, this appraisal process that Jonas has clearly gone through with him in his own head, but then into the Speedworks team, is it the same appraisal process that an individual coach would go through when the athlete is the aim versus Jonas's, which is the coach is the aim, or the first aim anyway, then to the athlete? Is that appraisal process still the same? And the reason I ask that, there may be a few coach educators out there who are listening, but I'm guessing the majority of people who are going to be listening, the next rung on the ladder is an athlete in front of them versus a coach. So just wonder if you could give a bit of context there.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's beyond just coaching as well. It's characteristic of all expertise. Uh-huh. So if you ask somebody who's really bloody good at what they do, and you say, what was the last mistake that you made? They're normally going to be able to go like that. I know what mistake I made, and I know why I made that mistake. And that's a really old idea, because all it is that mistakes drive people nuts. That idea of I'm always constantly engaging in an appraisal of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Because that's one of the features that really characterizes expertise across, and look, I'm talking beyond coaching here. Some of that research, excuse me, some of that research comes from firefighting, from military, from all sorts of different places. But the point is if I'm a coach and I'm not actively appraising and reflecting on what I'm doing, and being able to really critically think, well, why did I do that? How might I approach that next time? Then all you're doing is repeating the same thing over and over. And again, you've got another nice quote, which is you can coach for 10 years or you can coach the same year 10 times. It's your choice. But if I want to be an expert and I want to be really good at what I do, I'm always going to be tweaking and changing and trying this, trying that, which is the coach as the experimenter. And really, that's what's really drawing us together here, because what we're trying to do is fast track and help people develop a level of expertise from a base, and not having to spend 20, 30, 40 years grinding away and going, well, I might try this, I might try that, and eventually, hopefully, getting to what might be called tacit concepts, where I've just sort of worked through it enough that I've got a good idea. We want really foundational concepts for people to build a base of expertise from. I was with Jonas telling that story reminded me of a cycling coach that I worked with a few years ago. One of the very, very best coaches in the world, won a number of medals at the games, and we sat down for nearly 2.5 hours going through the first 5 seconds of the start of a race, different angles. Oh, I might try this for this person. But their limb length here, their ankle flexibility here, that means I might do this, and this is what might happen to their weight distribution, or I don't like the look of that, and that's how and why I might do that. And that's really what we're looking for here. That particular coach has spent years and years and years acquiring that level of expertise from a base of trying, seeing what happens. What we're doing is going, right, what are the foundational principles here? And how do you actively help get yourself better as a coach?
So when individual coaches are going through an appraisal process in the mind, what was my mistake? How can I rectify it? Would you recommend going one step further and trying to structure that appraisal process versus keeping it internal? And is there any ways you would potentially recommend people to be able to do that or not do that?
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose it depends what we mean by structure, because very often it's very difficult not to think about things, but I would always recommend to people that they spend some structured and deliberate time thinking about things, because thinking is hard. One of the things that characterizes us as human beings is we want to operate. It's very easy to operate quickly, and it's very difficult to operate in deep thought. So we use a tool called the Big Five. Now, Big Five, when you're reflecting on a session, when you're reflecting on a particular athlete, or even when you're reflecting on a small, tiny chunk of a session that might be, right, why are we going to get this athlete to back squat versus not? And it could be as simple as, what did I do? Why did I do that? What other options did I have? Then going, okay, well, what context would be different for me to choose one of those alternatives? And then how will I know that I've made a good decision here? And then active process of going, okay, well, when am I going to check on that? How am I going to check on it? And go back to it. Now, obviously, a process like that is going to be, which I'm certainly not suggesting you do that about everything you do. But Jonas made a really good point earlier, is I need to know what I'm not that good at the moment. I need to know what I'm working towards. And professionally, having a focus like that is a really, really important and good thing to have if you genuinely want to be good at what you do.
If there's coaches out there, which there will be, who don't have the luxury of having someone like you, Jamie, brought into a business or brought in to look after an individual coach, is there a way that people can utilize technology or utilize something that's already out there to give them a more objective view? And I'm just thinking of a recommendation that someone came up with on the podcast. I think it's probably universal throughout. How many people implement it is another thing, but recording themselves or listen or mic themselves up and listen back to what they're saying when they're saying it, record themselves, see what position they're in when they're coaching, etc., etc. Would that be something that you would recommend if they don't have an expertise like yourself?
Yeah, I think watching yourself back and reflecting on your practice is a really good idea. I think again the difficulty comes though, and I made the point earlier that lots of physical performances focus loads on what you coach and not on how you coach. So immediately, loads of people have jumped on the bandwagon of soft skills. It's just about relationships. It's about generating buy-in. All these nice, fluffy ideas that don't really help a coach get into the nuts and bolts of how do I actually help that person get quicker? How do I help that person get stronger? How am I behaving here in a manner that helps them? Because all of reflection depends on knowledge. And it depends on you having a really solid knowledge base, because otherwise all reflection is navel gazing and reinforcing what you're already doing, because you haven't got that conditional and critical knowledge that helps you go, oh, why might I do that? Why might I not do that?
We're talking a lot about building that really, really solid knowledge base before we can kind of take the next step. Just coming to your vulnerable side, Jonas, when it comes to your knowledge base, what is it that over the next year, 2 years, that you think I need to get better at that? That is the thing that I feel when I talk about it, that it needs refining or needs more information, needs further input, Jamie, etc. What's the bits of that knowledge base that you feel can develop from your side?
I probably, it's nothing sport related really. It's the fact that I'm a startup. It's the fact that we have a nice app and product that we're currently creating in order to scale our my sprint analysis with teams and squads, and everything to do with a startup is really where I'm at. Alan Murdoch calls me CEO Dodoo, And actually it started as a joke, but that's the reality. And sometimes I'm like, right, I have to be in CEO Dodoo mode. Like, what should I be doing right now? What are the boring things I want to do? What are the hard things that I need to do? Like, I have to analyze my life. I get stressed out working at home at certain points, and I have to ask myself, why? Why is this stressful right now? Is it because really I'm trying to juggle a few things? Okay, why am I juggling these things? Well, I wasn't that organized. Well, how can I be more organized? I should have got up at 5 a.m. this morning. Why can't I get up at 5? Because I'm a night owl and I'm up until 2. Okay, what can I do differently? So it's just me asking myself those tough questions and actually looking in the mirror and going, sort yourself out. Like, you've got a dream, you've got a job, you've got people dependent on you, sort yourself out. So I think the knowledge part for me is more about my own personal development, my ability to lead. I'm actually a bit of a recluse. I enjoy just being home with the kids. I don't actually, even though we go viral on social media, I don't actually enjoy social media. I erase Twitter and Instagram off my phone. It's on my phone maybe 2 or 3 days in a week. And so sometimes I think I hate people, but I'm in a job of helping people, right? So then I have to ask myself, why? What is it? And actually, what frame of mind? When am I in a frame of mind where I could sit on Twitter for hours? And actually, when am I not in that frame of mind? And what is going on in life, in my organization, in my own body, my health? What are the things that are limiting my ability to do what I know is important for the business, for my family, and for myself? So I guess it's those things. When it comes to specialist knowledge and information around coaching and S&C and rehab, and I feel pretty confident most of the time. I feel like I don't write well because I'm a bit dyslexic, but I love to read, and I read, and I think I have a broad set of knowledge bits because I like to read laterally. So those things, I keep pressing the button because you never know, something new might come up. Rarely is it new, just different perspective, or a bit more detailed, a bit more granular. But the general heuristics that were around 20 years ago mostly still apply. So I think my own personal development is about me as I growing older and becoming a real man. I keep saying that, a real man, as opposed to someone who thinks they're a man. Just kind of taking responsibility and doing the tough stuff so that I have no excuses.
I've thought a lot about, and this is probably moving slightly away from the topic that we're here to chat about, but I've thought a lot about that. Do I hate people? And I know that's a funny thing to say, or my wife says it, you just hate people. But the conclusion that I've come to is because doing the podcast, like, you're in front of athletes, you're in front of coaches, because you're on quite a lot. And when you're on, you're on. When you're off, you're off. Like, just leave me alone. I'm guessing, because both of you and I have said it, I'm guessing that probably resonates with a lot of other coaches out there, because they're in front of athletes, they've got to have this certain amount of energy. So when that goes, it's just like, leave me be. Like, I don't hate people, but just give me 5 minutes, or give me 5 minutes with the kids, or whatever it may be, just to down-regulate and build me back up for that next time when I've got to be on.
Yeah, I think that there's 2 stages, because, even though I'm not coaching track and field at the moment, I still do some consultancy with some clubs. So I go to the South Coast, I go to the East, and I go to the North. Weirdly enough, nothing's close to my house, right? I'm in the car for 2 hours. But when I'm there, I'm at a club for a day or two, and I absolutely love it. And I love being part of it, and I love the camaraderie and the clubs that I'm working with. There's really very small egos. Like, there isn't big egos. Everyone's kind of helping each other, and I think that's what's galvanized them as a squad and as a team. So I don't hate people. I think I just, like you say, it's almost like I have a certain amount of charge, and once that's given away, then that little that's left, I'm on the red, and I have to reserve that for the family. And my kids wake up at 6 and are awake, fully charged. And it stays fully green until they sleep, right? And so we don't have any pets, but I say you have to walk the dogs, right? You have to make sure you take them out, you keep them bouncy. We've got a trampoline for a reason, right? I bought walking boots. I'm a South London boy from a block of flats. I never thought I would have a parka jacket and walking boots, but we walk through the forest. We've got trampoline. We've got an air trap. We've got things to keep them bouncing, keep them busy. And I think I realized that actually, if I want to be a good dad and be available, then actually turning my phone off. Or sometimes people hate me because I go to my phone and I might have 42 WhatsApp messages. I only was on my phone an hour ago, so that's an hour of WhatsApps. And I open social media and it's just there, and it's actually daunting, so I leave it alone. I avoid it because like I could sit here and stare at my phone for a long period of time, but if I look up, the house may be on fire. So what is the priority here? So I think that's really it. I don't think I hate people. So one side is the balance, but the part of me that does sometimes get annoyed with people is ego, politics, and people getting in the way of their own development. A lot of the time people come to me and say, this is the problem. And I say, okay, great. That's the solution. Easy. Oh, no, but I can't do that. Why not? Because this will make me look a certain way. Or maybe a real problem is if I do that, it might cost me my job. What if it doesn't go right? And there are so many other layers to it. And sometimes that's why I am useful as a consultant, because I can go into a team and I can be really honest to the gaffer, or I can be really honest to the head of performance and say, this is the problem. And if it doesn't work, okay, it's not the team necessarily. It's not their heads on the line. It's mine. Most of the time it works. It's just it took someone to be a bit braver, or someone to just kind of say, push it a bit, or someone to reinforce what they're doing and say, let him do it. He's doing a good job. So I think that hating people part is sometimes like, I hate the fact that I'm going to say something actually the other way around. I'm very black and white. Like, I see a solution and I go for it. And as I'm growing, that leadership, that learning part is knowing when to pick your battles, knowing when to say a white lie. You're not fat in that dress. It's not, right? It's when to say, it's when to, choose the right thing to say at the right time. And I look at my son and I listen to him and I realize, oh, because he's just like me. I'm like, okay, that's my problem. That same thing there, is my problem. So I think learning that as well is an important part of my journey.
You've both mentioned a couple of times over the last half hour, critical thinking. And I've put that in the few notes that I pulled together. And I remember, I think it was undergrad or maybe it was master's course, looking at a paper and critically evaluate the paper. And I remember looking at it going, what is that? How am I supposed to critique this? This is a paper that's been published, peer reviewed. I'm looking at it going, I don't know where the hell to start. And I think that the critical thinking piece is a really interesting one because it said a lot, but actually doing it and living it is hard, is really hard. Whether it's being critical of yourself, it's critical of something else when you ask for feedback. Coming to you, Jamie, how can people develop those critical thinking skills? Because I'd love to be able to buy it if it's purchasable. Sadly, it's not.
I've got 12 bottles under my desk. I'll send one to you. And it's a whole lot more tiring when you're criticizing. I mean, like Jonas said, when you're being critical about ideas that are thoroughly embedded somewhere, where something is so strongly thought of that challenging things can be exhausting. But going back to the point you're making, for me, critical thinking does rest in most part on a knowledge base. Now, it doesn't mean that I've got to be an expert in a field to think critically about it. But for example, for me to think critically about quantum physics is a bit of a leap for me, because I haven't got the knowledge base to go there. But I can get myself to a stage, if I want to, where I know enough about a topic to be able to go, okay, well, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about this. Same can be said for practical experience. And this is the big one that's often chucked at academics, quite rightly so, across sport and sports science, which is, this study's great, but how do I use that? Oh, and I've done this, and that's not going to work here. And that, to me, is the essence of critical thinking, which is the critical and conditional use of knowledge. I know this. I might have a habit of going through my head and going, oh, let's just test this. If I play this through in my head, what happens? But to me, it's both knowledge base and habit. And it definitely isn't buying the latest book that somebody from Google is selling you.
It's interesting because I keep coming back to this well, you keep coming back to the deeper knowledge base, and it kind of slightly contradicts where I see people going when it comes to reading habits and the information that people consume. And it goes back to this kind of self-help, all about the buy-in. How do you think people are going too far that way versus what you both have said for the last 35 minutes, which is going deep on the knowledge? Like, people think that binds the buying, the culture, the all that kind of stuff is sexy and it's kind of easy to read. For me, the hard stuff is what you're talking about, which is developing that deeper knowledge. Do you think we've gone too far that way?
For me, absolutely, yes. I think that everybody is desperate for something simple and easy. And one of the things that sells is simple and easy. And whatever the latest book is, whether it's culture, whether it's psychological safety, whatever it is, people aren't properly interrogating ideas and going, okay, well, what does that mean? Because somebody's selling a book about the All Blacks that said, oh, well, better people make better All Blacks and sweep the sheds and let's all do breathing exercises. They're not going, okay, well, why not? What does this actually mean? And that surface level is an absolute killer, especially, I think, for lots of coaches in physical performance that might have a massive might have their entire back history of education based on what, which means when they're looking for how and why do I do this, they're stuck on the latest best-selling self-help book that goes, oh, you've just got to generate buy-in, you've just got to have good relationships, and everything else will work. Well, no, and you can imagine S&C coaches. Imagine how upset people would be if I reduced the watt of coaching down to squat, bench, and pull up, because that's the equivalent of what very often we're doing.
I think it's the same thing happens in the sprinting world or the rehab world. You know, when we reduce it down to Nordics, or we reduce it down to it must be I don't know, even sprinting. Yeah, right. When we reduce it down to one component, you know, I've been debating with a popular American coach who I respect online, and you know, he keeps using a word and saying this word is the reason why our coaches are struggling. We should use this old word because that old word is better. I'm like, no, that's the same problem. It's not about the word. It's about the understanding processes and principles, and the it depends. Like in which scenario would you apply it, and which scenario would you not, and what and why. And so my simple mental model always comes back to what I've said before, like the what, the how, the why. At first, you do need to know the what. And in the early part of my career, I tried to read everything and try to speak to everyone and understand the information. And then at some point, you need to make sure that's not just information. It can't just be isolated research, case studies, or one perspective. You need to know that as knowledge. So, okay, how do you apply it? Maybe in different contexts. But even then, you need to know the why and understand, okay, when would I, and basically it depends. And that becomes the wisdom. So it's like information, knowledge, wisdom. The problem is most people's information, that what part is still missing. There's chunks of it still missing. And I do think that at some point, you either go and do the research or you find a good resource that's done it all for you. But then, you know, you're going to be challenged by biases. You're going to be challenged by so many other things. But either way, you do need to have that clear, what have I seen people talk about recently? Specialist generalist, right? You need to know enough about enough, right? So that you can start to apply it. And you need to go out and then apply it in the real world and deal with the fact that you write a pretty plan and then 2 of your athletes turn up ill. The other 2 are healthy, but they've been on a bender the night before. The other one's had a bereavement. The other one's come from a junior squad and now come up as extra motivated. And someone else is really demotivated because that same person has come up and it's made them feel like they're challenging for their place. Your great plan, your sets and reps may not apply right now. You probably need to know how to adapt in that environment. And but you go on social media, maybe this is part of why I don't like Twitter, is because sometimes you could go on it and it's what's the new fad? I'm now going far to the left. I think Nordics are amazing. And no, I'm going far to the right. Nordics are terrible. And I always go, do you know what? Whatever exercise you're going to use, underpinning physical qualities is what we're going for. You want to create the physical qualities in a way, and you want to create an adaptation, and you want your athlete to go into it feeling like they're going to thrive, not survive. And so you're about creating an environment that really motivates them to push. It's not the exercise. There are probably 4 or 5 different ways you can create that stress. It's about seeing your environment, understanding your individual, understanding even your coach. You may have the best eccentric hamstring stress, and I'll focus on hamstrings as the easiest example, but you might have the best process and program. And you talk to the doctors and some of the academics, and they're like, footballers are pussies, or footballers are weak and are childish because, and you as practitioners are useless because you're not making these guys do what they need to do. But they're not taking into context that most football coaches will not give you a down day, match day -2. They're going to push you on that day. So there's an appropriate time to do your loaded work. And if you've just lost a game on Saturday, come Monday, they might push you harder than they should. And then Tuesday's a normal training day. They're now pushing you again. So the reality is, should you wisely go into the gym and create extra stress? Probably not. Should you maybe provide a step-by-step progressive way to create that stress? It might mean that it's assisted Nordics. It might mean that you're not doing any Nordics at all. You're doing isometrics. Medical world say the reason why injuries haven't gone away is because people aren't doing what we've told them to do. And I would say, well, maybe they're not doing what you told them to do because you're not actually applying it in the context that they're actually working in. And so that's just an example, but they're everywhere. Those are the examples I see every day. And they're very emotional, deep set emotional type things. And so I've learned and realized that in order to address that deep set emotional thing, you almost have to provide a similar type of emotional response. You need to help them understand that if their first job is player availability, that understanding all of the balls they're having to juggle across the week, understanding how to create the context for the athlete, how to manage upwards. I talk about this so much because so many coaches like, your plan and your process sounds really good, but my coach doesn't give me enough time, or he doesn't believe in this, or there's several reasons why. It's like, okay, well, what is your relationship like with your coach? How have you posed a question? You've told your coach, your athletes need to be fast and they need to do this work. Maybe they're not going to listen to that. Maybe you flip it and say, coach, how are we going to win more? Or what's the focus this week? Or what's the focus this cycle? And he will identify his problem. And I always say, touch their pain point. If they identify a problem about your right back because he's missed loads of balls, or your centre mid because of certain scenarios, touch that pain point. Provide a solution for his problem. Don't suggest that this is your problem. Provide a solution for him. So we're not just talking about sets and reps or exercise selection or any of those things. Injuries and injury prevention can be addressed very easily through programming, and easily you can exacerbate them or make them worse through programming error. But some of the other stuff is more about knowing your environment, knowing your players, knowing your colleagues and your manager, and finding a way to sell your point. And Ben Rosenblatt said it really well to me. He's not trying to create buy-in. He wants to go on a journey with people. If he's trying to create buy-in, he feels like a fraud. He wants to educate and involve them in the process. Then they push it. They suggest it. They choose the exercises. They come in for extras. The manager then says, what do you think? So I feel like that these are the skills and the bits that are missing. But going to your point before, it does require understanding the right amount of knowledge from across genres, and then moving deeper and deeper to yourself.
And I think you make a really important point there, which is that as a coach, you can't be evidence-based. You can't work from, right, somebody somewhere has written a paper on this specific thing, because we just don't have enough high quality evidence to do that. That's why I'm suggesting that we should be evidence informed as a coach. That means using best evidence where it's possible to get it. Does it transfer to what I want? It means understanding what the needs of this context, this manager, what do his or her players needs at that particular time, and then using personal experience. Where have I tried this? Where has it worked? Why has it not worked? That to me is the essence of what we're talking about here.
It cracks me up on, again, using Twitter as an example, because it's a good representation of how people really are. Someone will make a point, opinion. Oh, can you send me the research paper that says that? No, No, that's just what I've seen in this thing. But it always seems to be that, oh, send me the paper. Well, no, that's not. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I believe because of this. But I think it's an easy one, and then maybe you have to go through that process to think that everything has to be in a research paper. But yeah, and then come out the back end and think, yeah, I was probably a bit of a douche asking that kind of question. But I do think it always exists. But I think Jonas's point to do what Ben has done, and that you quoted Ben Rosenblatt there, that requires a certain amount of dropping the ego and becoming vulnerable and handing the power over. And I do know what you mean. The buy-in, or what Ben means, the buy-in does make you think, I'm trying to coerce this person into doing something that maybe don't want to do. Well, actually, just go round it the other way and put them in charge so they do want to do it. That's not buying, that's giving the power over. So I suppose it does, what we're talking about does mean that the ego has to drop and vulnerability has to reign to a certain extent, Jamie.
Well, I think that's one of the really interesting things and why it depends, because in certain circumstances, you are going to have to do the opposite. Jonas has talked about coaches that he's working with and coaches that I'm working with who are fighting for their jobs at different times. Now, I'd suggest that the understanding of those social dynamics, where sometimes you might not put an athlete in charge of their development, but you definitely, and perhaps as a nice rule of thumb, is you definitely want them to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and to try and get them to a point where they understand that they think what they are doing is perfectly appropriate and relevant for them, and they believe in you as a coach. But I think that the really interesting bit is how you get there. And I'm certainly not suggesting it's right, I'm going to coerce this particular person all the time and I'm going to go around manipulating everybody. But there are certain people that are very, very difficult to move. Yes, you've got your ideal, but you've got to bear in mind that it depends and you're in a particular context. And Jonas mentioned the stereotype of footballers, which is lots of them don't like doing physical training. I don't think lots of them do. And if you look at the physical standards in the Premier League at the moment, they're sky high. But sometimes in some squads, you are going to have to deploy different methods with different people at different times.
And even there, Jamie, I challenge that idea because I always, you just have to read sometimes disgusting responses to people's tweets and stuff for the players about how they don't, that they don't want to train and they don't want to do stuff. And we're doing some stuff in college football and NFL at the moment in the States. And it's the same perspective. People believe that they don't want to train, but some of it's that they don't trust the training. Some of it's that actually, if anything, they just want to be ready for the next football training session. And they don't want to risk turning up, not being able to show their skill set and then being dropped. But in nearly all the squads that I'm working with, the guys love training. They absolutely love it. It's just the right time, the right place. And I'll turn up and we'll prepare them to go out on the pitch, and they'll come back in. And sometimes it's like, right, let's do more. I'm ready to go. And sometimes I've put everything out on the pitch. I am completely finished. And it's recognizing that if you trust them and they trust you to have that honest discourse, then it's always going to be the appropriate amount of load at the appropriate time. Now, some players won't know what they need. And so you're right. Like sometimes you're standing in front of them and saying, follow me. Sometimes you're walking alongside them saying, what do you think you should do? Or let's just do it together. And sometimes you're standing behind them like, look, you write the plan. Let's go with it. And I think that's maybe different players, different types of characteristics in different parts of their journey. And that's the it depends part again. It's like just coming back to like what the person who's in front of you, how should you approach them? Do they trust you? And then that's when it's like, okay, well, I know I could get really good physical overload by doing 4 sets of 4 Nordics plus some iso hamstrings plus some sprinting work I know I could create a really good physical stimulus. But they will have serious DOMs for 3 days. Do they have 3 days to recover? And if they don't, they will not trust me to do their training again. So maybe I should just err on the side of caution and choose the appropriate stimulus for today. And that's really what we're trying to do right now.
Good place to round. Oh, go on, Jamie. Go on.
No. Sorry, I was just going to say what some of the recent work we've done is looking at developing critical consumers for players, for athletes as well. And if you get to a stage where you as a coach have got players that can really are self-aware enough to go, oh, this is how this feels. I understand what you're doing. And if we work together on this, I think we're going to get this right. And that's, I think, the sweet spot where you want to get to with most athletes. I understand how I feel. I understand what that means. I also understand what you're trying to do. So it is a genuine team effort. I think that's the ideal. It doesn't mean it doesn't depend though.
Good place to round up. And we're erring on the side of potential kids running in the hotel room, Jonas. So I think he's there.
They just did, and then they ran back out.
Did they?
Respectfully as well. So
happy days.
It could have been screaming in and saying, I don't want to leave, but it all depends, right?
Absolutely.
They're very bought in.
Yes, they are. Good work, Dad. So when does this collaboration kick off, and when can people see it come to fruition?
So we'll have 3 stages of our new education process. The first 2 stages will be mainly pre-recorded material. Okay. Now, I've learned from last year. I put my virtual internships got 40 hours of material. Like I said, I had imposter syndrome. I was like, let's give you more, give you more, give you more. Lots of coaches loved it. Some couldn't get through it. So we've taken the important parts. We've re-recorded and essentially synthesized it so it's even clearer for people. So there's a pre-recorded element to the foundation. So the foundational information needed for the coaches. Then the second part is just full of case studies and full of sport-specific examples for coaches to follow. And I'll be honest, I don't like giving paint by numbers programs. I always think it depends, but actually it's been constant in our feedback that we need to give the coaches, because they're not clear yet. We need to tell them, start here, go here, go here. So we've provided examples for each sport. So each cohort will depend on the off season of that sport. So for each sport, we provided case studies and and step-by-step processes to apply our system and our philosophy. And then the final part is the Speed Matters mentorship, and essentially that's where it's not pre-recorded. That's where we spend some really good quality time with a very small group of coaches and go a journey over 12 weeks and have a really good, hopefully intimate and honest conversation consistently across that 12 weeks. And that's what I'm most excited for. That's what I'm really, really excited for. So Jamie's been working with my coaches, making sure that we are delivering to the standard that I want us to be. He will also deliver some of the information on the pre-recorded stuff. And then we would work together throughout the Speed Matters mentorships. So end of January, the material will be up, ready for people to consume. And then Speed Matters will start the following months. So looking forward to it.
Superb. Jamie, I know I spoke about social media a little bit on here already. Where can people find you on social media?
So I'm at JT Grey Matters UK, and search for me on LinkedIn. I'll be there somewhere, and same on Instagram. I think I'm Instagram the same, JT Grey Matters.
Top man. Jonas, reminder for us.
Me, Speed, on Twitter, I'm eatsleeptrain_. Our website and most things apart from that is speedworks.training. And so you can find us anywhere and everywhere.
Happy days. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good rest of your holiday, Jonas, and good rest of your evening, Jamie. And I'll catch up with you both soon.
Cheers,
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys.
See ya.